today. There were probably a lot of things you could have done with a rainy Sunday afternoon. I know I'd be out in my garden right now if I wasn't here with you, but I'm grateful to be with all of you today and hear these inspiring stories. I'm going to tell you a little bit different story. Don didn't steal too much of the thunder, but Michigan Climate Action Network is 10 years old this year. Wow. We were founded, actually it's the 2014 Climate People's March to DC that my predecessor, the great Kate Madigan, and many of you in this room who helped found this organization, got on the bus to DC and went to the then largest climate march in history. 2019 marches surpassed that, and the recent 501 rallies have surpassed that, thankfully. But on the way home on this bus, they said, gosh, we can't even say the word climate out loud politically in Michigan. What are we going to do about that? And many of these folks worked for different environmental organizations at the time. They said, I think we need a new organization. And that's what they did. They founded the Michigan Climate Action Network on that bus ride home from the People's Climate March. Right. That's a success in and of itself. And I want to take a little bit of that context and draw out the broader moment that we are sitting in. And sorry, remember that professor part for just a second. Right? We are, folks, the Michigan Climate Action Network, and all of us here today are standing on the shoulders of ancestors and a lineage of advocacy and care for the planet that it is our duty, I believe, to continue to carry on. We know from the Romans, from the earliest cultures, the sacredness of wilderness, the importance of restraining our power, and our obligation to care for the natural world. Even Benjamin Franklin advocated for clean air and water. The conservation movement of the early 20th century, late 19th, early 20th century, where figures like John Muir created the national park system, Yellowstone National Park created. The publication of Silent Spring, Rachel Carson was vilified for her work at the time. We look back, right, and say, look at that moment, to understand that human health connection, which then spurred, of course, the first Earth Days. Ann Arbor has a pretty special place in that history. University of Michigan, climate teach-in that we're at today. That movement led to 10% of the American population participating in the environmental movement of the 1970s. You'll often hear political science professors talk about this 3.5% rule and a 5% threshold. So just to put that in context, right, that was 10% of the American population advocating for the clean air and water. During that time, we passed the now bedrock environmental laws. From species and air and water and toxics. We created the Environmental Protection Agency. We did that, folks, under a then Republican President Nixon. And the Senate votes on the Clean Water Act and the Endangered Species Act were unanimous. Can you imagine such a thing? The environment and climate are non-partisan issues. There's a famous political scientist at the time who said, well, we've passed these laws, this is non-partisan, good job, everybody. I so wish he was right. But of course, a few other pieces happened and some of that backlash and eroding of that started. Dr. Robert Bullard, of course, then pointed out some of the problems with the white-led environmental movement and thinking about preserving places. So we got to talk about environmental justice. Was the first person to really analyze the disproportionate impacts of environment by race, by creed, by color. Folks, we are in a moment now where we know we have to address climate justice, and we can do better than we did before. That is imperative on us to carry this lineage forward. These powers of social movements and activism brought about those changes, and I believe we're in one of those moments again. How lucky are we, is the way that I like to think about this. Because you, if you don't know it already, you are the majority. The vast majority. Over 70% of Michiganders believe and are concerned about climate change. But we don't act like that all the time. And I think that we should act like the majority that we are and continue to make that positive change. A clean energy future is ours for the making, and we are doing it here in the great state of Michigan, folks. Local action has always led the way. We were doing climate action in Michigan all across the state before we had any federal policy. We're going to continue to do that again. We were doing that at the state level. When I came on board in 2022, there were about 79 groups in the Michigan Climate Action Network, and we are now up to 162. We keep growing because all of you keep recognizing that this majority needs to take action. We did a few things in that time. We passed, because of your advocacy and all that growth in the groups and the justice piece, the state now has a My Healthy Climate Plan that we are following. In 2022, we saw that big federal investment, and in 2023, we had the Clean Energy and Jobs Act here in Michigan, folks. That doesn't happen without all of you. Exactly. Good idea. That's because of your advocacy. We were one of 13 states. Michigan is a leader. Do you know that our state department, Environment, Great Lakes, and Eagle, brought home more clean energy investments out of the federal dollars than any other state? That is big too. Jobs. The Inflation Reduction Act here in Michigan, 27 billion new clean energy projects and 26,000 new jobs. 66% of those jobs and 40% of the investments, just as 40, are located in low-income communities. Nonpartisan is a theme here today. 19 of Michigan's 62 projects are in Republican-held districts. Even though those folks didn't vote for it, we want the benefits to go to all Michiganders. That represents more than 30% of the projects in the state. And health. Like all of Carson in the 1970s, Michigan, unfortunately, is in the top 5 states for diseases linked to air quality. Our asthma rate is 10% higher than the national average, and we're 5th in the nation for premature deaths. Cleaner air, folks, means fewer hospital visits, medical bills, and costs, and all those same pollutants that are causing those health issues that we advocated for so rightly in the 70s are the same ones that cause climate change. Curtailing climate is about health and justice, of course. This is the face of the climate commitment that I get to see all around the state. From my own Kalamazoo, which won one of the community change grants and is building resiliency centers and is retrofitting a whole home for 300 houses in Kalamazoo. EcoWorks and Interfaith Power and Light over in Detroit, who also got one of the community change grants and is building out the workforce and those resiliency centers. We have 15 groups across the state now that I don't think even existed in 2019 that are serving our steering committee. From the Sioux to Marquette to Grand Rapids to Lansing to Oakland County, Kalamazoo, right here, you all are doing that tremendous work. The other piece I will let you in on, we are working very, very hard with all of our educators in the state. We just launched a piece called Subject to Climate, which is a Michigan climate education hub, so that our teachers can feel confident and supported in teaching climate at every single age in an interdisciplinary way. That, folks, right, is how we really change this culture and build up the next generation of advocates. And I'm here in Ann Arbor, right? You just heard these amazing stories. My goodness, what successes. I'm going to end with one piece that you might not see as a success. I know many of you in Ann Arbor here were probably following your city council meeting on the resolutions that would have moved the city forward with taking over public ownership of your energy utility that were narrowly defeated. And I talked to some of the advocates from A2P2 and some of our government folks about these pieces, and every single one of them said, we lost today, but we're going to keep going. We might need a ballot initiative, we might need to do this, we got a new study. We gotta keep going. And I include this as a success because remember that history, that lineage, those ancestors that we're all a part of? Guess what? They faced lots of adversity and lots of challenges and lots of supposed losses along the way that eventually became successes. In each way, every step in action, even if not immediately successful, is part of the success. Look at the level of conversation you're having here in Ann Arbor when 10 years ago we didn't say climate out loud. When I do this work, I really like to rely on a Jewish proverb. You are not obligated to complete the work, but neither are you free to abandon it. Often our trouble is not that people don't think our ideas are right, but that they are not possible. The megaphone for climate movement is ICAM, and I so appreciate the opportunity to amplify some of our successes, because it's these stories that you heard here today that combat that cynicism, that my action won't make a difference, because it will, and you don't know who you are affecting with each one of us. So I hope that you too will start to use the frame that we have done this before. We are doing this right now, and we will continue proudly and boldly to represent climate action like the majority that we are. Thank you so much.